Hi traders, welcome. Today I wanted to make a video since we are trading at all-time high levels on the equities markets and a lot of Bitcoin, for example, near all-time highs again. I wanted to make a video going over different techniques that I use in order to calculate profit targets at new untested levels to the upside. Okay, this techniques I'm going to talk about actually work on any place in the chart. You can use this anywhere, even if the market is not at all-time highs, but it is especially useful at all-time highs because obviously if we have a market that is coming up into untested levels, we don't have anything to the left that is going to help us guide us in terms of profit areas, etc. Okay, so we're going to go over a few points of things that I use in order to predetermine areas where I could potentially look to scale out of longs, take profits, etc. Okay, so number one, very self-explanatory, big psychological levels. Okay, for example, the ES market now, well, this is the micro MES, but it's pretty much, same levels. But you can see, for example, here, we're trading at 64.25. And so if we zoom in here, we obviously know that coming up, this 6,500 level is going to be a very important level because it's just a big round number, multiples in this case of 500, or it can be 100 or 1,000, etc. Okay, so big round numbers are always going to be a big area that we are going to be looking into, just because again a lot of people focus on them. And also, like, if you look at option strike prices, a lot of the volumes are going to be at this big round number levels. Okay, so that's number one. Now number two, basically if you have a market that comes into a ranging sideways environment and then you have a breakout, then this is pretty classic stuff where you would measure the range. And again, with this, I'm looking, when I'm establishing a range, I don't necessarily look for the furthest highest up point and the lowest. I'll usually try to even go in and just look for the most confluence of hits, even if some of them exceed a little bit. I want to get the most number of touches, so that gives me the most relevant levels. And when we do this, then we would take our Fibonacci extension tool, anchor it to the top area of the range, go down to the bottom area, and then that will give us the Fibonacci projections that we can use to take our profit or look to scale out or close positions. Or even if we're not long, we can even use the extensions at areas of possible reversal as well. So even areas where we think market might run out of steam and it's going to be pulling back, for example. Okay, next one, pattern breakout measurements. So again, this is very classical stuff. For example, if we have a market that's coming up and then it starts consolidating into a pennant formation, for example, where it starts coiling and coiling into an apex point where we see that it's going to have a breakout with momentum in either direction. Classically, if we're coming in an uptrend and we start consolidating, we would expect a continuation up. Okay, so in this case, let's say that the market does consolidate here and we get a breakout, then we would apply just a classic measurement from the highest point to the lowest point of the pattern, and we would project that same point on the breakout, and then that's going to be how we use to measure, for example, take profit area there. Okay, trend leg extensions, number 4. This is one where this one doesn't present itself as cleanly, But if you get a market that is trending, following, a very nice wave pattern, and you have, your extension leg, your retracement, extension leg, retracement, like this, then, in this case, you could take a previous extension. Oh, let me change the color. You could take the previous extension leg, and then once you make a higher low and you start breaking the highs, you can project that into the coming leg, and then you can look at where you think, based on the market behavior that you're having in this trend, where we are going to potentially have the same measurement as the previous leg we had in the market. Similarly, another technique, same concept, using the trend, but we would use again Fibonacci extensions. And in this case, you would take the swing high, the next swing low. So this will be, again, we're making higher highs, higher lows. So you would go from high to low, and then you would get your extension levels, and then you would use this as possible areas of taking profits, or where you think market might be exhausting this impulsive leg and we're due for a retracement. And the last one, which is one that is not very commonly used or known, but I really, really like it, and it's when we have a trend line breakout. So let's say we have a market that does something like this, and we establish a trend line here. Again, the drawing is not exact, but you get the idea. We get a trend here, and let's say we had a touch here and we had a touch here, and then we have the breakout. So then what we would do in this case is we look for the lowest. Obviously, I'm talking about an upside breakout. If it's to the downside, we just do the opposite. But here you look for the lowest point below the trend line that we broke, and then you're gonna establish a direct line into it. And so you're gonna anchor your fib extension from this point here to the lowest point that we made before the reversal, and then you're gonna establish your fib extensions from there. And this is also a very good technique. And again, if we're talking about the a break to the downside, same concept. We have a market that's trending up, and then we break down, and then we establish the trend line, and then we select the highest point down to the trend line, establish our line, and then we set our Fibonacci extensions to the downside. Okay, and these are things that I go into a lot greater detail on my trading courses as well. So definitely check it out if you want more, more detail, more examples, etc. So now that we've covered the basics, let's just go into 5 charts and just look at practical examples of these concepts that we have just talked about. Okay, so here we're at a chart of Tesla. This is a daily chart of the Tesla stock. And we can see right here how we had a big uptrend. We started coming down for a pretty extended period of a few months downtrend. And then here we establish pretty much from early March into mid-May. So pretty much for 2 months, we were in this range right here, from this lows up into this highs. And then eventually we had the breakout here. So once we have the breakout and the close of this daily candle, then here we can go, let me zoom in so it's easier to see. And we will just take a Fibonacci extension of this range. So we're going to measure the range breakout. So in this case, we just take the Fibonacci tool. We go from the top edge down into the bottom edge. Okay, and here again, I'm not using this low because I want to have the most confluence of hits. So if I take this low here from this move, you can see we have 4 confirmed touches here. If I was going to use this one, then it's only 1 touch. Same thing in the upside. 1, 2, 3, 4, breakout, okay? So then we take the fib from the range high to the range low, and then you can see right here. And obviously, this is a daily time frame. So if we're day trading, we're going to go into the lower time frames and we're going to have a lot more detail, but we will have macro levels that we're going to be looking into to trade on the lower time frames. And then you can see here, for my extensions, I always like to use this. I'll always have the 100 and 0 anchors, and I like to use the 127.20 extension, 161.80, which this is the golden ratio up 1 deviation, 200%, which is basically just double the move that we measured, and then 21.680, which would be 2 deviations of the golden ratio. Okay, so let me go back here. Let's erase this. And now if we go back to the chart, you can see 127.20, we actually gapped through that level. 161.80 we hit, and it actually price consolidated here. And then we got into the 200 extension, and then we had a significant drop. So basically we doubled this move up to the upside before we had a significant reversal, okay? So that's an example of a range breakout extension. Then if we go into ES, this is a classical pattern measure move. So this happened recently in the ES market. Price came, we made a new all-time high here, and then you can see heavy resistance up into this 63.35 level area, and we're making consistent higher lows. We have wicks, but no break in structure to the downside, and we are forming an ascending triangle. So when we're talking about ascending triangles, what we're going to measure is from the highest point down into the trend line below, okay? So in this case, we would measure this right here. Let me actually do this with a drawing tool here from TradingView. Let me make this a different color so it's easier to see. And then we would just take this, clone it, and then we just put this right at the breakout point, which I mean is the same as the line over here. And you can see that we actually just hit that measured objective on this close that we had on Friday, okay? So again, this is a ascending triangle. We measure from the upside resistance down into the trend line below, and then we just do the measure move on that, okay? Next example we have on Bitcoin, okay? Bitcoin has a all-time high right over here at this apex 123,231, and you can see we're pretty much breaking now from this falling wedge. We came impulsive move up, consolidation, so now we expect a continuation of the momentum. So in this case, we would also take a measurement from the highest point down into the trend line down below, and then we're going to project that from the breakout level. So in this case, if we start pushing up, we can use this measure move from this pattern up into this level right around 100. You know, this is pretty much right around 125,800. So then this would be a next area that we can look in order to take profits, for example, or as a possible exhaustion point. And finally, a couple of examples of measured trendline break moves. This is in NASDAQ, where we just made a new all-time high on Friday. And you can see here this week, Monday we had a push up, retrace Tuesday, and then big rejection down here. And then on Friday we found, on Wednesday we found resistance and we broke out. Okay. And then if we establish now, we would take a measurement from the trend line to the lowest point, which would be right here. So we would get our fib tool and we would go from the trend line down into the bottom of this green candle here, which was the lowest point. And here we have our extension. So you can see we actually found some significant resistance here right around 127.20, which was near previous all-time highs. Resistance again all through Wednesday. Thursday this is on Thursday. Then Friday push up, come back, and now we push up, but now 161.80 will remain as our next target that we are looking going into Monday of next week, okay? And one last example here on silver. This is a 3-day chart. This is a very long-term measure move, so this is great for like swing trading, okay? And you can see we have a long trend line coming from the end, pretty much around July 2020, and we broke out of it right around the beginning of 2024, okay? So we pretty much had almost 4 years right here on this chart of this trend line coming down that we broke. We already back tested it, and you can see we are now ripping higher, okay? So we can take the measurement from the lowest low to the trend line point connecting up. So we would take our Fibonacci, going from the trend line to the lowest point. And you can see in this case, we already hit 127.20. We just recently hit 161.80. So now 200% is going to be the next target here at 40.605. Okay, so as you can see, this applies on any time frame, any instrument. So I hope this has been insightful. Again, this is different techniques that I use for profits at all-time high levels. If you found this useful, drop a like, leave a comment, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.